Welcome to the Muricho channel. Can you survive a nuclear attack? You're sitting in your room reading a book when suddenly your window is filled with a bright light. Your eyes are blinded, and you quickly jump up and run to the window in curiosity. This is the biggest mistake you could make. As soon as you reach the window, a shockwave from the explosion shatters the glass, and shards fly into your face, eyes, and body. You fall to the ground in pain, losing blood rapidly. This was a huge mistake. Let's go back and start over. You're sitting in your room reading a book when you suddenly see your window fill with a bright light. Your eyes are blinded, but you immediately think that such an intense light could be from an explosion. So you don't rush to the window. Because you know that the light from an explosion travels at the speed of light, while the shockwave travels at a much slower speed of sound. Therefore, if this is indeed the explosion you fear, the shockwave will reach you in a second and shatter your windows. So you quickly move to a sturdy wall away from the window, lie face down on the ground, and cover your eyes and ears. And then, you hear a loud boom as the glass shatters. Everything in your room is flying around, and you can feel the walls cracking, but thankfully, your building doesn't collapse. What you feared has happened. A 10-megaton thermonuclear bomb has just exploded in the heart of the city, which is equivalent to 667 atomic bombs like the one dropped on Hiroshima. What you do in the next few seconds and minutes will determine if you survive. Now it's time to take cover. After the bomb explodes and the first shockwave passes, panic and fear will fill your city. You may hear crying, moaning, and screaming from outside. Probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, animals, and other living things have already evaporated. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of buildings, have been destroyed. But you don't have time to think about any of that. You need to keep your grief aside for later, because if you can still breathe, it means you have survived the effects of heat, light, pressure, and flames scattered by a nuclear bomb. But you still have two more effects to deal with: radiation and nuclear fallout. To take precautions against nuclear fallout, you may only have seconds, and if you're lucky enough, maybe minutes, if the wind isn't blowing in your direction. If you were to look outside for a moment, you would see a huge mushroom cloud rapidly rising towards the sky. The reason for the cloud's formation is due to the extremely high temperatures released by the explosion, causing the air in the surrounding area to rapidly heat up. As the hot air rises, it leaves a vacuum behind, which is then filled with cooler air from the surroundings. The newly circulating air heats up and also rises, creating a powerful upward air current. During this time, the explosion spreads its flames and the dust and ashes it draws from the ground, scattering them into the atmosphere. As the gases from the explosion reach the cooler upper layers of the atmosphere, they quickly cool down and start to scatter and bend in all directions, like hitting a wall, forming the top part of the upward column, which is pulled towards the vacuum in the mushroom cloud. As a result, the head of the mushroom cloud becomes even more rounded. The whole process is both awe-inspiring and fascinating, but don't be mesmerized by its magnificence and stay put. As we will see later, when faced with terror and fear, animals not only flee or fight, but they also freeze. It will be tough to resist this reaction, but you must not freeze. The mushroom cloud will rise up to 30 kilometers in the next few seconds, with a head that will stretch 77 kilometers wide and 10 kilometers thick. The amount and direction of radiation released into the environment will be determined by the height at which the bomb was detonated, the weather conditions at that moment, and the fuel purity and quantity used in the bomb. If the building you are in hasn't collapsed, you are probably far enough away from the point of the explosion. Therefore, the radioactive particles scattered around during the explosion probably didn't reach you, or if they did, you received a dose well below the recommended level. The good news is that you probably won't die, but the bad news is that you should pay attention to some symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, dizziness, fever, fatigue, and hair loss. These symptoms indicate acute radiation syndrome. Depending on the severity of these symptoms, your chances of survival will be determined. Your risk of death hasn't completely disappeared, but there's not much you can do about it. If you had prepared for such an explosion beforehand, you could start taking potassium iodide salt or tablets from your emergency bag, as directed on the package insert. Clean iodine will bind to the cells in your thyroid gland, so if radioactive iodine enters your body during a nuclear reaction, it will not bind to these cells, and your risk of radiation poisoning will decrease slightly. Of course, these tablets cannot protect you against all the effects of radiation. For example, you will need to drink plenty of water. If your water supply is still working, it is advisable to be near a source of water in your home. Unfortunately, depending on the distance from the explosion center, you may have received a dose of radiation that could increase your risk of cancer by hundreds of times. Your children may also have already experienced health problems at birth. However, none of these are problems that you can think about right now. If you are indoors, you need to start isolation immediately. Do not try to go outside. Even if you are in a building, you are protected from about 50% of the effects of the explosion. If possible, try to move to the homes of neighbors on middle floors, as ground and top floors are the most dangerous places. This is because most of the radioactive particles scattered from the explosion to the sky will accumulate here. Wherever you are, try to close off airways with any materials you can find. For example, if your desk is made of wood, break it up if necessary and use the planks to cover broken windows. Use blankets to try to close gaps between the planks as much as possible. Also, make sure to close ventilation openings, doors, and chimneys. You should not forget that there is a risk of fire in buildings as well. As we discussed earlier, many buildings and materials may have been exposed to temperatures exceeding their limits due to both the pressure wave and the fireball emanating from the explosion. It would be very useful to have a fire extinguisher that you are sure works nearby, both for these reasons and for the risk of a more normal fire. You will not be able to go outside for at least 12 hours, probably for the next 24 hours, and possibly even for 48 hours. Therefore, it is beneficial to store food and drink and keep them in a safe place. Please do not try to go outside during this time. Contrary to popular belief, the most deadly effects of radiation do not work for years. Within an hour of the explosion, 50% of the radioactive fallout will have decayed and lost its effect. The reason I say at least 24 hours is that 80% of the effect of the fallout will disappear within the first day. However, if you have enough food and water and help has not yet arrived, you can choose to wait for at least 2 weeks. At that point, 99% of all radiation will have passed, but please remember that radiation is not like a bullet that works instantly in the body. It is something that accumulates in the body. Therefore, the amount of radiation we receive at any given time may not be very significant. What matters is how much radiation we have received over time periods such as an hour, a day, or a year. These all add up, so if you received a lot of radiation at the time of the explosion, even if radiation levels drop below 1% 2 or 3 weeks later, the radiation level is still much higher than normal, so the radiation you received at first can combine and make you sick. That's why the longer you can stay in a safe place, the better. What will happen if you're outside and manage to survive the explosion? Actually, it's not much different, of course. For those outside, the risk is the possibility of seeing the moment of the explosion with their own eyes, if they happen to see the bomb falling from the sky for some reason and witness the moment of the explosion. Unfortunately, you will experience temporary blindness because a new and much stronger sun will have burned in the sky. If the explosion occurred during the day and you are far enough away, this blindness should last only a few minutes. But if it happened at night and you are very close to the explosion, you may not be able to see anything for 30 to 40 minutes, which will severely limit your movements and unfortunately significantly reduce your chances of survival. Therefore, I know it's an absurd suggestion, but if you see a ball falling straight down from the sky, it might be best to curb your curiosity. Especially during these times when we have never been so close to a nuclear war. But regardless, if you are outside, you need to do one of two things. Either quickly get away from the explosion area or immediately seek shelter in an indoor space or shelter. A quick way to decide which one to do is to fully extend your arm and try to cover the mushroom cloud with your thumb while closing one of your eyes. If your thumb can completely cover the mushroom cloud, you are far enough away. And perhaps it's best to reach a place where you can get help by car, speed walking, or running. Needless to say, you should go in the opposite direction of the mushroom cloud. If you have a car, you can choose to use it, but keep in mind that the roads will be crowded, and there is even a possibility of not being able to move due to traffic. If you encounter such an obstacle, abandon your car immediately and try to get to an indoor space. Do not try to take cover in your car, its thin metal cannot protect you. Remember these numbers: to protect yourself from 99% of the radiation released from the explosion, you need to take cover under at least 12.5 centimeters of steel, 40 centimeters of brick, or 60 centimeters of earth. If your thumb cannot cover the mushroom cloud, then you are very close to the explosion, and you have probably received a high dose of radiation. If you notice that dust and ash are falling around you, try to cover your mouth and nose as thickly as possible with a piece of cloth and run to an indoor space immediately. Once you enter a sheltered area, carefully remove all your clothes. Take your time while removing your clothes and don't spread the accumulated dust on your clothes. Put your clothes in a bag and throw them outside, never keep them inside the house. If the water is working, take a shower immediately because both your clothes and skin are likely to be filled with radioactive particles. Even if you can't see them, make sure to scrub your body with soapy water in the shower, but be careful not to create any cuts on your skin. If radioactive particles mix into your bloodstream, you could be in serious trouble. If the water is not working and you have access to some water, wet a cloth and carefully wipe your body. Here's an important detail: an atomic bomb would probably disrupt the electricity and communication network and even bring a country to its knees, as we mentioned before. The best way to find out what's going on is through battery-powered radios. It's also essential to prepare tools like whistles that should be in every emergency kit because, just like in an earthquake, you could be trapped under a collapsed building in a nuclear attack. Even if our building does not collapse at first, it can still collapse later due to the damage it has sustained. As you can see, even if we are talking about just one bomb, we are facing a disaster as big as an environmental catastrophe. We said that staying indoors can reduce the effects by up to 50%. But a shelter built only one floor below ground level can reduce the effects of a nuclear attack by around 90%. The deeper our shelter, the less the effects, so the more prepared we are for such an attack, the higher our chances of survival. Whatever we do, the effects of such a bomb would continue for decades, and the cities where the bomb was dropped might become uninhabitable for years, and the cleanup efforts could take months. Depending on where the bomb was dropped, there would be extensive economic, psychological, and sociological collapses, and water and food sources would be contaminated with radiation, so these processes would take a very long time to recover from. Many newborns in the region would suffer from diseases and deaths, and tens of thousands of people would develop post-traumatic stress disorder, and there would be tens of thousands of cancer cases. Just dealing with these alone would cost tens of billions of dollars, and it would be very difficult to do so in a collapsed economy. I repeat, we are talking about just one bomb here, and this should not be a risk that humanity can accept. Therefore, we must raise awareness around us, and ensure that such bombs are never used again and, if possible, that they are destroyed and never produced again. Once one of these bombs is dropped from a plane, it cannot be taken back. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video.